Hi everyone, today we're going to be continuing with the series on garden design and going through a step-by-step guide to each individual element. Today we're continuing with the client brief. Now this is the first or the second stage after you've been instructed on the garden design. I say first or second because quite often I'll do the site analysis and survey first. However, because we're coming on from last week looking at the initial consultation, this follows on really well. So I thought we'd move straight on to this one next. The initial consultation, we got to know the client, we got to see who they were, what their lifestyle was like, but it was only really a quick snapshot, and there's only so much we can learn on that phase. Today we're going to be really digging a lot deeper and understanding a lot more about what the client wants and what the client needs. So if you'd like to come with me, we'll go and get started and go through the brief together. Okay, so here we are. We've been invited back into the home and straight out into the garden. It's a nice day, so clearly it makes sense for us to be out here. Before I came in though, however, just like the initial consultation, I was looking around at both the house, the street scene, the front garden, trying to absorb a little bit more than I did on the last one, and getting some clues and some hints as to what the client might want. I go in, obviously meet and greet the dog. Then we head on out here, and it's really about fact finding and also building rapport. We've already met the client once, but it's great if we can get a good relationship going, so spending a little bit of time chatting about them and their garden as it is at the moment, as well as what they might be doing and whatever else that comes up in conversation, you know. Now on the screen in a second you're going to see a list of questions that I would suggest are some fairly fundamental basics. Everything from how many people would you have round if you were going to have a barbecue this weekend, to some perhaps more factual questions such as are there any disabilities or are there any allergies? Clearly we need to ask questions like this, as if for instance somebody has a bee allergy, we don't want to be putting lots of pollinating plants around the seating area, as that's going to increase the chance of somebody being stung and the consequences thereof. And often you'll find that the conversation will lead itself as you're asking these questions. Don't be afraid to let that conversation go off on a bit of a tangent, even if you sometimes think that you're not really getting a lot from what they're talking about. You never know when that little nugget of information or really vital piece of clue that could influence the design might pop out. So do let them go off and talk about things, and have enough time booked in your diary to be able to do to give the client brief the justice that it needs. This is going to set out the store for your design, so there really isn't too much information that you can get. Now I know some designers will also bring books or photographs of work that they've either done or they might just be generalised garden design books, because that's also another great way of inspiring the conversation. If somebody says that they like a water feature, if I've got a book that's got a few different water features, I can show them a couple of different types. So is this the sort of thing you mean, or is it more your sort of generic type globe, stainless steel globe? We've all seen them in the garden centres. Just so we can assess their expectations, and again, without wanting to sound like a broken record, this can help with the budget because we can start talking about costs at this side. And as we go on, when we're asking about things like how many people do you think you might have when you're having a barbecue or something like that, do you want a water feature, what about lighting? We're making notes on this, and I tend to find that it's very helpful if I scribble down some basic costs next to each of these. So for instance, if we're looking at entertaining maybe 6 people, the patio might need to be at least 25 square metres. Okay, so we can just put a little nominal number down there, £4,000 to £5,000. Water feature, I might just put £5,000 there. Lighting, £3,000, and so forth. It gradually builds up this idea of a cost, so I can present that to them at the end and talk them through that, so we can try and finalise this budget, which we absolutely have to get to. The idea here really is that they are driving the individual elements, and by putting numbers down by them we can justify a budget and we can make sure that it's realistic. Now if when you hit them with £35,000 to £40,000 they balk at that, then clearly we can go back to that list and sort of say, well, what here is potentially optional, and what might we reduce the specification on. So for instance we might say, well, the lighting, if this is too much, £3,000 I've got next to the lighting, we could perhaps reduce that down by half to £1,500, but you've got to understand that you're not going to have that light within the water feature, or the spots that are in the flower beds might be reduced. And again, we're setting expectations until we get to that point where we've got a good idea of what they want to spend, and they've got a good expectation of what sort of design they're going to get. as part of the initial consultation, we should have already got to a very, very rough, broad brush idea of budget anyway, so we should know whether they're going to be realistic or not. And we could have discounted them if they come up with a budget of £5,000 but started talking about water features and lighting and what have you. So there shouldn't be any big surprises at this stage, but it does help just to refine that little bit more at this stage. In the end, budget is going to come down to them once we've got a design and we're finalising it. The specification, so for instance, they want paving, but clearly we can spend £20 on a square metre on paving, or we can spend £120 on a square metre on paving. Lighting could be £1,000 budget, it could be £5,000. Planting, £2,000, could be £10,000. These are all elements that the clients are going to be able to control to a point if we know we've got some nominal numbers next to them. But I try and stress that the client is going to be in control of the budget. As we proceed with these videos, as we go on, you're going to get to this point where we've got an outline design, and that's at that point that I start putting together an approximate specification, sort of outline specification, and an outline cost, and it's then that they will take over in terms of, well, actually I really want this, or you know what, this is too expensive, so let's cut that back. So once we've finished the actual meeting as such, and we've had a good chance to talk through what they want, and we've got a good understanding of what they need, and we've got all the information that we think we can glean from them within that appointment, we've taken some photographs, we understand the garden a bit better. Next, we need to put this in writing. Now, there's several reasons why we want to put this in writing. First and foremost, we want to make sure that as we proceed with the design, we can refer back to it. So for instance, if we get to the end and the client sort of suddenly goes, well, why are we looking at a budget of that? Then we can say, well, we did talk about the budget at that stage, and we did talk about this water feature costing that much, and you've since gone on and increased that. But also, we can then clarify exactly what we think of the garden, what we think is possible, and get their wish list down in writing. I tend to do this in bullet points, because again, sometimes when you're sitting down and talking to people, they've got a good idea of what they want, but actually when they start reading back through, they might suddenly come back and say, well, actually we said 6 people, but we've had a think on it now, and actually we probably want to go for more like 10. The other thing we forgot was we really want a little swing for Timmy over there who's going to play like that, and it gives them another opportunity to add more elements or refine their brief right down. And then that becomes the document that we can then sit down at the drawing board with and hopefully come up with something quite creative. Now, like every element of the garden design process, this is something that you're going to have to personalise and develop as you go on. So, for instance, the questionnaire that I mentioned, or those questions that came up on the screen, that it might be something that you like to have a bit of paper out there so that can prompt you. It might be something that you send to the client in advance so they've got time to really think about the answers. It might be, like I do, that you think that actually it's better if we have a really relaxed and casual conversation, because that way you're going to be able to get a lot more hidden information that perhaps isn't obvious from the outset. Whichever way you want to do it, it doesn't really matter. The key is that you're going to make this your own, and that you're going to try and get as much information out of them as you can. And over the years, you'll probably find that will develop and change, and you'll be able to read your client that much better. But it is just going to take time, and those sort of things are going to develop with experience, and I'm sure over time you're going to get this just right for you. And that's it, real simple, quick video for you. I'm not going to spend too much time going through any more detail. I think it's something that you will develop over time. Next, we're going to be looking at the site analysis, so we're going to be looking a lot more at what's out there and how to assess that and what we really ought to be looking at. But I hope you found this useful. If you do, give us a like, and hopefully see you next time. Take care.